Okay. We are live and we are on. All right. All right. Hola, hola. It is 5:30 on Wednesday, July 14th, and I have a special guest from Evergreen Counseling on with us tonight. Um, from Wheaton, Illinois. You guys have an office in Wheaton?
Correct.
Okay. And so I have Ines Martinez Sierra, who is an LPC. What does the LPC stand for?
It is a licensed professional counselor.
Licensed Professional Counselors. Great. And I am Vanessa Avalos, and I am working on opening up the first ever bilingual Spanish playroom within the Chicagoland area. I'm not sure exactly where it's going to be, but we are working very fast to get it up and running. So I just wanted a little introduction about myself and then a little bit more from Ines. So I am a second generation Mexican American and I did not speak Spanish growing up. I was born in Texas and my parents at the time in the 80s thought that, there was a lot of racism in Texas. And so they did not teach us Spanish. So I had to learn. The older I took more classes, and um, my dad always taught me how to keep within the culture. I took folklorico classes, and I just did various things. And I've always been connected to my roots, and that also led me to becoming passionate about raising bilingual children. And that's one of the reasons why I created Luna y Cielo. And so I wanted to create a space where our community can raise bilingual children. Um, and so tonight we have Ines Martinez Sierra, like I said earlier. Ines, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. So right now, I am a mental health therapist or a licensed professional counselor here in the Wheaton area. I graduated in 2018. Um, so about 2 going on 3 years of clinical practice. A lot of my clients are either children, teens, and or young adults. I have a couple adults too, which I think that my own childhood, my upbringing, my young adulthood, but really connected me to my own culture, language, and it pushed me to do something to support and validate the Latinx community. In my career and in my own personal life. I am also a second generation Mexican American. My family is from Guanajuato, Mexico. Since I was young in our household and still to this day, we speak fluently in Spanish. I think that I transitioned into ESL, or what is now known as a dual language program, fairly early on. I want to say second or third grade. So I can say I'm biliterate in both English and Spanish reading, writing. Um, Huge positive, but it also comes with its challenges in a work setting too. So we can talk about that a little bit later on. Right now, I am about 5 months pregnant too, so it's an awesome stage to.
With your first, right? You said?
Yeah, it is my first due November, so it's even extra special that Luna y Cielo, a playroom, a Spanish learning center, something like this, is going to be an option, an opportunity
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of Latinx children to reincorporate that and practice our culture and the beautiful language.
Yes. All right. Um, let's see. And so I do know. So we were gonna have Priscilla Dean, who is the owner. Can you just maybe explain a little bit more about Evergreen's initiative to hire and employ specifically Latinx therapists to help with the community?
Yeah, so Priscilla Dean is an LCPC. She's a licensed clinical professional counselor. She is the owner of Evergreen Counseling. In previous workplaces that she had worked before, she really didn't feel fully fulfilled with the clients, how the professional workplace was going, and she wanted to create something that mirrored that and much more, to be a trauma-informed care center, to provide cultural diversity and inclusiveness. We in is highly and mainly a Caucasian white neighborhood, but her inclusivity within the staff, within our clients, to be part of the LGBTQ community, to be supportive of that, has expanded a lot of that, which is awesome. I was the I believe I was a first Spanish speaking clinician. And very recently, I want to say about 3 months ago, Evergreen hired two awesome therapists, to Adriana and Noelani, who are both also bilingual in Spanish. We also have, I want to say, a couple of other counselors, therapists that are very diverse too in their background and topics, and inclusive clients they like to support in session.
That's wonderful. All right. So today we're going to be talking about play, culture, and counseling. And so I guess the first thing that comes to our mind, to my mind right now, is we're still in the pandemic. I can't say we're really out of it, right? Because the kids don't have vaccines right now, so the kids are, they're vulnerable, right? But for the last, has it been a year and a half yet? It feels like longer, maybe. The kids have not been able to see their friends. They haven't been able to go. I'm a stay-at-home mom, so I would take my kid to the library. I would take them to a bunch of different places, and all of a sudden that came to a screeching halt, right? And so my son is 3 years old, and so he stopped socializing for about a year and a half, right? And I noticed, like, during the pandemic, his behavior changed, right? He was acting out more often. He would be very irritable, and I would hear people say or suggest, "Oh, you just have to spank him. Oh, you just have to control him a little bit, you know." And just recently, I was just thinking, I'm like, man, if I went through two depressions in the pandemic, what did my child go through? And he can't even verbalize that. So, can you talk a little bit more about exactly the effects that COVID maybe had on young children? And then maybe how our culture has also affected the way our parents parented, and maybe have used those types of parenting techniques to kind of reprimand us as the parents and be like, hey, you should be doing X, Y, and Z, but not understanding the effects that this pandemic has had on our children. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. I think that your first question was, remind me of the first one.
Yeah. So, like, how has the pandemic affected children?
Yes. So in sessions, we were an essential location, medical place, we could say, where immediately we went from having sessions in person to completely having them virtual or via telehealth, which children also had that with school, having remote learning, hybrid learning, we could say. We noticed increased anxiety symptoms, increased symptoms in depression, um, throughout the years, more recently at earlier ages, as well as teens and young adults, higher rates of suicidality,
Mm.
ideation, self-harm urges. Again, you talk about your son, and a lot of these difficulties, they didn't have these opportunities to be mindful, to connect with outside sources, friends, family, extracurricular activities, school, which really played, and it gave it a limit to be able to de-stress and learn how to regulate themselves, play and be active, having other stimuli outside of their home, outside of their bedroom. So a lot of children, either while they it was active or at a higher probability during COVID, seeked out a lot of therapeutic services, which was great. And still going back to school in person or hybrid, right now during summertime, we still have a lot of clients coming in wanting and needing that support with higher rates of anxiety and depression.
Mhm. Wow. And so going back to the second question, um, I guess in other words, how, our parents, we love our parents, right? And like my mom always says, they were never given a handbook and shown how to parent, but whatever they were taught is what they knew. And we're not blaming any of our parents, and we love our parents, right? But sometimes they had antiquated notions, maybe is a good word to suggest that maybe sometimes they weren't always understanding um, of how we parent now. And how has that maybe uh, affected how, like, if parents are always telling the daughter, which is now also a parent, you need to just spank your son's butt, or you need to, reprimand him. How has that kind of played a role during this pandemic? I don't know if you've seen that with your any of your clients, especially being Latino, right? And so maybe that's maybe a little bit different in our culture.
No, I think that even more of an increased, sadly enough, during COVID and lockdown, we could say there was an extremely high increasing rate of domestic violence
Mhm.
in the homes with parents, which cost again dysregulation even with adults. So then with parents having minimal to no support for their own mental health in
Mhm.
their normal typical day-to-day life, caused them to be a little bit more stressed out, not mindful, and more, we could say, corporal punishment, which has been a big staple in our Latinx community, which now we are a little bit more, we need to be a lot more open in positive parenting and positive discipline, not so much punishments, a huge difference in wording with that too. So I think that it's difficult too, maybe this intergenerational housing to it. So there was a huge effect with COVID and the Latinx communities. Well, we need a social distance. How do we do that in such a small space where there's multiple family members living in one household and spending more time together, working from home, doing school from home, not being able to go out, that it increased a lot of these negative behaviors, and again lack of being able to regulate yourself, because a lot of these things were fairly minimal to us: going outside, going to the library, enjoying a meal outside, connecting with family, friends. So a lot of these things, it was something that we have needed to learn even before COVID. We had to really focus on it and put a spotlight on it during COVID. And even right now that we're a little bit more in a safer zone with vaccines in adults and older children. But it's still a factor that we still need to touch point on and shed light on. It always comes to a difficulty. I have a lot of parent check-in sessions, no matter the children's age. Parents want to practice that. They'll say, I want to, quiero aprender cómo castigarlos in a way that's going to be safe and healthy, where I'm not getting DCFS called on us, because that
Oh,
increased a lot too during COVID. Um, so that need, that want is there. It's just, how do we break these cycles and these patterns that have been taught to us that we need to adhere to, whether it's our own mothers, our grandparents, Ay, qué feo se porta tu niño. You have to spank him. What do you mean time out? What is that? Mételo al cuarto, no lo dejes salir and XYZ. So it's something that we're learning day to day.
Right. Oh man. I always I've been trying to change the way I parent because sometimes me and my husband maybe we're getting into an argument and then I get into a bad mood and then I take it out on the kids and I'm like I need to be more conscious of that because they shouldn't have to suffer because we're not in a good mood or we're upset. And it's going to happen, right? We can't not ever get upset, but then we can't take it out on our kids. um
But again, I think that that's where it kind of starts. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Before we're able, a lot of our parents and us as parents, we blame ourselves for having those reactive moments, thinking that they should be conscious. But that exact example that you mentioned, it's a defense mechanism. And these defense mechanisms, when they happen from a subconscious level where we're just trying to protect ourselves. I just got out of work. I had a horrible day at work. I'm going to come back from work. And what's the first thing that I'm going to do? I'm going to kick the dog because it's the dog's fault that I had a bad day. Or you're just projecting, you're displacing all your anger, frustration on somebody that's a little bit more vulnerable and easier to. And that way, we have to change that mindset within the Latinx community. Not just children, parents also need that mental health support. And then I get going into this bigger bubble, bigger umbrella. Well, how do we change that stigma, that taboo for mental health in our community and in our culture?
yeah, I was talking to my mom yesterday about that, how um in our culture especially, oh, if you're going to therapy, están locos. And that's not true because, and I learned that from my son because he was maybe one or two at the time. And I'm like, this kid is trying to tell me something, but he can't talk because he didn't have any words yet. And I'm like, oh man, like, how does he process feelings when he doesn't have any words? And then I was like, wait a minute, I've never processed my feelings. How do I process feelings to myself? Like, it just in my head. Do I talk to my husband? Do I talk to my friend? And I really don't talk to my friends about maybe things that I'm going through. And I'm going to start going to therapy soon myself because I've had trauma in my life and I want to work through that. But I think just talking about it and saying that it's okay to do it, that's eventually gonna, and teaching our kids that it's normal, that it's okay to do something like that. That'll all help change our perspective on therapy.
A lot
So
of barriers that need to be, number one, acknowledged, be self-aware, and then for us to start, be willing to break those barriers down.
yeah,
Parents can get that support with mental health. Marriages and relationships, however those relationships look like, if you just moved in with each other, if you're married with one another, and for the children to get support in their mental health. They don't have to be acting, estás loca porque estás haciendo terapia. No, on the contrary, I feel good. I just want to learn more about myself. I want to learn more about my past. I want to be more knowledgeable in it. I want to learn how to be a better
right,
parent. You can go to therapy even though things aren't jumbled up. It's
yeah,
actually when things are jumbled up and then we go to therapy, it's I've pushed myself to the limit where now
yeah,
I kind of feel overwhelmed and it's too much for me. And it's
right,
and it's difficult.
yeah. And I think also just, I remember my mom saying, my mom grew up here in the United States, even though she was born in Mexico. And she told me that she had to learn how to play with myself and my brother because she had never experienced that from her parents,
Mhm.
right? Because the parents, my abuelita worked, my abuelita was a stay-at-home mom, and she had 10 kids to feed. And so she had no time to sit there and play, right? And even my tias, who helped raise my mom, tampoco, they didn't have the time to do that, right? And so growing up, or while my mom my while I was growing up, my mom was a parent. She had to understand what that meant. How do you play with your child? Because that's all the kids want to do, and we don't always want to think of our parents as only the authoritarian type of person. We need to learn and learn from them, and we learn through playing as well.
100%. I have a couple of clients in mind, and from the past and current ones. This and younger teens now. I want to go out with my parents. I want to enjoy a meal together. I want us to go out to play. I want us to go take walks. What are we grateful for our parents? Well, I'm grateful, or the moms will say, ¿Qué más quieres? What do you mean you want to go play? What do you mean you want to go do these extracurricular activities as a family? I give you food. I give you a house. I give you I clothe you. That's parenting. I'm already parenting you. But a huge piece of that, it's this notion of play, of connecting, of communicating. And again, our plate is so full that we don't find that play and that connection with our children, that attachment,
Mhm.
important. And it is something hugely important.
I think I at least I I hope for that during the pandemic, parents were able to find more time to play with their kids. Um, I my poor husband, he went back to work in person the last couple days, and it's been hard. He's been tired, and those hours that he's waking up to get ready to commute and then commute there and then on the way back he could have been with us, and unfortunately that's not happening anymore. um but we're grateful for the time that he did have working from home, so that way we could be all together as a family. um let's see, we do you have any advice for parents transitioning their kids back into playing with other children? O sea, what would you say to parents? Because we went yesterday to a concert with a couple of friends, and it was hard. Like all of us were like running around trying to corral our kids, and it's like we haven't had to do that in a while, and now we have other kids, right? And so what kind of advice would you give parents to give themselves grace? Because I know us as moms, we could be really hard on ourselves. And um, do you have any advice for moms?
I think that number one, it starts with being realistic and being truthful with yourself as a parent. We have to also acknowledge maybe the fears, uncertainties, and anxiety that us as a parent, holy moly, I'm gonna take out my kid or go on this mom and other children play date. How is this gonna look like for me? For parents not to have high expectations on what is perfect, um, to go out and try, exposing ourselves to it. Maybe at first doing things very gradually, going on a one-on-one date, just with their own child, going to the park, seeing how their child responds. It's going to be very normal for that child, if they hadn't done it before, to be a solo player. They're just taking in this new environment that's been very new, especially with COVID babies and toddlers that really didn't have time to go out, or that opportunity to know that it's very normal. If, hey, we're at the park and my kid is still playing by itself with wood chips, that's okay. Let him
Mhm.
do that. If they're
Right? They're exploring.
Yeah, they're exploring, it's okay. If they click in with other children, beautiful. It looks like he or she, they, them, they liked it, they appreciated that. I, as a parent, feel confident with it. Now let me go out maybe to the next step. Let me try to expose myself, maybe at the mall, at a bigger park with more children, and seeing how that works out with it. I think too, talking to the kids beforehand. Hey, we're going to go to the park. Is there anything that's scary to you? Are you worried about anything? Right now, again, it's a new environment for children. So even talking about that even before we go to the park would be something beautiful. Again, connecting and communicating with your child, if that's able to do so. If not, before or during that play date, whether it be just you and the child by themselves or with other children, those positive affirmations to tell your child, hey, you're safe, you're okay. Other kids are around. Maybe they'll notice rowdiness or different noises, stimulus.
Mhm.
It's okay that you're feeling scared. For right now, if all you want to do is sit next to mom, even though we're at the park, that's okay. Whenever you're ready to explore, you can go out. So I think just go and play. You can grab, I don't know, the dirt. You can go around. I'm right here. Just reminding them of that security and that safety, because that's what children are looking for in the parent. When they look back at you, if they're going down the slide, they want to make sure that the parent is still there. And this is all new ground for children reincorporating themselves in outside play.
You know, you said something that resonated with me because um, we often tell our kids don't do something, and yeah, this is it's okay that they do it. Like you said, touching the wood chips. It's not that your child is touching something that they shouldn't be touching or that they're gonna get dirty, because kids should get dirty. It's okay. But the kids want to explore. They want to know what the heck this little brown thing is, and they're probably going to put it in their mouth. And it's okay to say, "Este no está bueno para poner en la boca, but you can play with it." And
Mhm.
I am more that parent that tends to allow the kids to explore, and I'm there to make sure that they don't get hurt. My son went down backwards down the slide. And instead of saying, "No, no, 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 don't do that," I just made sure he didn't hurt himself. And once he got it, he was completely fine. But sometimes we hold our children back when we play because we don't want them to get hurt, but sometimes it prevents them from learning.
Correct. Yeah, I think that just not crushing that curiosity that children have. And also just being compassionate to yourself as a parent, or maybe so hands-on or overprotective helicopter parents,
Mhm.
um, for right reasons. Maybe
Of
the
course.
consequences will be a little intense for the child, right? This feeling of feeling constrained, but we're doing it because we're worried, because we want to make sure that you're safe, because we want to make sure that you're making healthy choices. So for as a parent, for you to say, hey, I have these insecurities, these fears as a parent, that's okay for me to have them, and I'm going to try to be open and supportive of my child's curiosity.
Yes, definitely. Um, let's see. We have a list kind of going, and so I didn't prepare myself. Um, Can we maybe talk about culture and trauma, and maybe if you want to define trauma, and then we can kind of talk about maybe some experiences that um, our culture may experience? Uh, yeah.
Yeah, I think that trauma is a very unique experience, past and present experience, responses that we have. Trauma can be defined as anything that you have been through or that you have witnessed,
Mhm.
which is something very interesting where a lot of people say, oh, well, it didn't happen to you. How has it been so difficult for you? Well, we witnessed it, so we were part of it. A type of trauma can be something as simple and as little, no matter your age range, as a dentist appointment
Mhm.
and getting an extraction done, the noises, the lights, the doctor, the lab coat, that can be extremely traumatic for the child. And maybe not that moment, maybe later on they'll say, that was traumatic for me. I remember going to the dentist. I remember staying at the hospital for 3 days, whether it was for a cold, appendicitis, whatever it was. That was scary to me. As a society, as parents, as you yourself, an individual, we should not invalidate those experiences that were traumatic for us. If that was intense for you, if that was scary, if that triggered um, parts in you that cause distress, where it's impacting your day-to-day life, whether it's school, work, personal, social life, that's something for us to attend to. When we don't attend it, when we don't process it or acknowledge it, years pass by. Your young adulthood, your adolescence, and that what happens as an adult, we still carry that trauma with us.
Of course.
In a lot of Latinx communities, that trauma that maybe we see, but we don't validate it and see it as a form of whether it be acute or full-on PTSD, is domestic violence,
Mhm.
is substance use and substance abuse, any type of sexual trauma and abuse, emotional, verbal abuse, and or neglect. So a lot of these can be considered part of this like trauma umbrella, we could
Mhm.
say.
And I think sometimes our culture tends to think, or anyone, in fact, we have this preconceived notion that trauma might be physical abuse or emotional abuse or um, sexual assault, and that's not always the case. Like you mentioned, it could just be going to the dentist. When you go to the dentist and everyone's like coming in your mouth and they're not telling you what they're doing, that's causing trauma. I remember for my second birth, um I
Mm-hmm.
won't get too detailed. I was like, yo, like, she's like, the doctor was like, you're very tense. I'm like, yeah, because you're not like, you're just like, you're, I'm trying to say this where it's appropriate. um you're just like very forceful with you, the way that you are entering my body, and it's a violation. I told her, I'm like, you see plenty of people on a daily basis, on a yearly basis, and this is a routine. I'm still a person, and I would like you to go a little gentle with me, please. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And like, I don't think they think of it that way, like I'm still a person. And
Mm-hmm.
same thing goes for the children, like that's how they can get easily traumatized, right?
Yeah, the
So
informed consent piece, and like
yes.
you mentioned in birth and our birth story, that's a huge piece of trauma. COVID, what
Yeah,
just happened this last year?
for
COVID,
sure, it's a trauma.
grief, that's a huge part. Grief through this COVID time, this last year and a half, of what we lost, of graduates, of going to school, of learning about yourself, of being constricted. Um, for us, years from now, months from now, still right now, and a lot of us, that could have been a traumatic period for a lot of people. They didn't have that support, that validation. They can identify COVID
Mm,
as part of their trauma.
right. And so do you want to maybe get talk about or give examples of like maybe some type of trauma that our culture has experienced? I know immigrants can experience culture or trauma. Kids, like you were saying earlier, you didn't speak English, and so you probably were traumatized. I know I have a cousin who got made fun of because he spoke only Spanish, and he had an accent when he would speak English. From there, he never spoke Spanish again. So that's another form of trauma that, our culture can experience.
Yeah, I think that especially would and again, I'm extremely glad and happy that the Latinx community has started to be more aware and open with mental health, and bringing their children in. It's something that we as clinicians, especially Latinx clinicians, to make sure we tell them, it's a known factor, but to say anything that your children talk about, that you may talk about, whether it happened in the past or it's currently happening. I am a mandated reporter, and it legally and ethically, if anything were comes to about that it would be characterized as abuse/neglect, I will have to call DCFS.
Mhm.
So I think that is something where we are being able to connect with children's and teens to say, hey, yes, this is not normal to happen. It's actually causing a lot of distress in you. No wonder you're feeling anxious. No wonder you're feeling triggered. No wonder we're
Mhm.
having suicidality thoughts. No wonder we're having self-harm thoughts. Listening and advocating for the children, and again, as well as the parents, sometimes they're in this um, negative dark environment that could be, again, domestic violence, um, that needs support, that needs education, Because then what happens, it's a cycle, it's a very repetitive cycle. Substance use, where a lot of kids see this as very normal. Oh yeah, my dad drinks all the time, he passes out, he doesn't go to work, that's why we sometimes don't have money, don't have anything to eat, our electricity gets shut
Right.
off. That's not okay. That's not, your medical attention isn't being taken care of. Yes, you may have a roof over your head, or you may have clothes, you may have a shelter, but that connection, that safety, it's that safety piece. You're
Mhm.
not feeling safe. That's something huge. That's something that we need to talk about.
Yeah.
So in this, we talk a little bit about this term, adultification or parentification, right? Where in a lot of these situations and instances where domestic violence, any type of sexual abuse, whether DCFS, the Department of Children and Family Services, have been a part of some of these situations in these families, or not, what usually tends to happen is that parents are just trying to stay afloat, whether that be financially with their jobs. Why? Because we didn't have that education. We came to this country and all we're trying to do is live paycheck to paycheck. So that means minimize time with children. That means, hello, then again, it's a cycle. So then no time for play. And then what comes to happen is usually the eldest child, or no matter their age, tienes que ayudar a hacer la comida. Tienes que ayudar a limpiar. Why? Because it's going to be good. I'm strengthening you as a child, as a human being, because you need to be responsible. But there's a time that it's appropriate. There's a time that it's age appropriate. Right now, even up to teens, they need to be curious. They need to have freedom. They need to play. They need to connect with nature, connect with friends. This screen usage, whether it's phone, tablet, TV, computer, that's not healthy for us. Part of it, education setting, we need it. It's bound to stay with us. Social media / screen use, but then how can we do a better job with it to minimize it, or to make sure it's at a healthy amount, so that it's healthy for us. So then all of this happens where parents are just trying to keep afloat, have a ton of responsibilities on their hand, that then, with trauma, children are parentified. Then at my age, you could say 12, 13, I need to learn how to cook. I need to take care of X amount of brothers and sisters, that I have. And that causes a lot of responsibility and stress on a child that's not age appropriate, which has a number of different things that, impacts their normal development.
Right. And then later on, that can also turn into, ay, ayúdame con esto, like example, maybe like the parent needs help with social security or
Uh-huh.
ordering stuff online, and then maybe you don't have time to do that because you're cleaning, watching the kids, you're cleaning, you're doing X, Y, and Z. And then all of a sudden, the parent gets mad because your child's not making time as an adult to help you fill out the password, fill out these paperwork.
And it's not, and again, it's something that adults need to be, and there's a lot of barriers with it, but it's something that we need to take responsibility to say, I'm going to try to get a translator, medical translator. I'm going to try to take someone with me who's an adult that knows English, that can translate. Or maybe, hey, it's my responsibility, whether it's a class you're taking at a community college, whether it's a book that you're getting, for them to try, um, to learn, some English, because a lot of this responsibility then is put on their child. I think, for
Mhm.
instance, a personal disclosure of mine, again, I knew English from a very early age, and I had a great foundation in my Spanish language, where both of my parents at the time and still are highly and mainly Spanish speakers. Where, in a way, part of me, I want to say littleness, said, wow, that's so awesome that my parents trust me, that they're, giving me a responsibility to translate at this doctor's appointment, where I'm writing out this letter, filling out this form, But then also a huge part of that, it's a huge responsibility. And in day-to-day language, a lot of these medical things, medical terms, legal terms that parents are urging and needing their children to translate are not age appropriate, that are pushing them to come to a part in their development that they're not ready for, and even can cause shame. Oh, I didn't translate it
Mm,
correctly, or I'm saying this response or this translation to my parents and my parents aren't understanding it. It's a lot of responsibility that should not be placed on a child, but it happens a lot in
right.
our culture.
It's almost inevitable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You referenced maybe learning English, and sometimes that can happen when you have maybe two or three jobs, and or you can't afford it, and
Timing.
so but once the kids are old enough, right? Then you guys have the time to do so, hopefully, right? And still the energy to do that. You also touched something else on teenagers, and I guess when my daughter was first born, I just remember like realizing like the teenage years are going to be those years where my kids don't want to be with me. My kids might hate me because I'm just thinking of, how I would, as as I went through the teenage
Your
phase.
own
Like,
experience.
what'd you say?
Your own experience.
Well, yeah, I don't know if I went through all of that because I don't think I ever resented my parents. But I do remember seeing, like, I was always the one that would go with my mom to see the family, and I still do that. Um, and so I just remember, like, maybe, so I don't know who, I don't want to say, and I have an example specifically on somebody. But I know those teenage years are always very hard, and those are the years that will change your child, right? And so I made a conscious effort early on to um not so much be my daughter's friend, but more so let my daughter know that she can always trust me and come to me, because I know when she's a teenager, she might not want to do that, but I want to set those boundaries now, that she could come to both of my kids can come to me at those teenage years when they see something bad. They're not going to get in trouble, but we're going to talk about it. Um, we're going to teach them what's appropriate, what's expected of them. And they're going to explore certain things. They need to understand there's consequences, you know. So maybe, I don't know if you have any input on how to build a relationship so that way the teen years aren't so bad, because there are teenagers that end up maybe resenting their parents for always being too strict on them, or lo que sea.
I think that this is one of my favorite topics to
Oh,
touch
good.
on sessions. This connects with a lot of different things. Immediately, when you say teens, I think of sexual development.
Hmm.
Immediately, when we think of teens, it's these quote unquote risky behaviors. And it's kind of funny. It's like a double edged sword. And again, in family households, it's about these. So it's a 3-year-old's party. And what do they have? They have beer, they act crazy, a lot of sexualized behavior shown in negative ways, that it's kind of like a norm in culture and parties. And then we expect almost miraculously that when our children come up to that age, that they're not going to want to practice it, that they are, oh, but you better not do that. When it's we normalize it from a very young age. I think that you're doing something beautiful in creating that connection, that openness, that talking, normalizing topics that are very difficult. Again, I can't imagine parents who have had substance use difficulties, and they're in a recovery process. Parents who had sexual abuse, domestic violence in their household, where again, you naturally have these urges and these fears to want to take a hold and control your child's life. Well, you may do that. A lot of parents do that. But then what effects, what positivity, what benefits is it going to have for your relationship with your child? On the contrary, it's not really going to be a good foundation. Where you saying, hey, I know these things are out there. I know sex is out there. I know risky behaviors like driving fast, financial illiteracy, um, substance use. They're out there, but I trust you that if you're in a situation where you need help and support and guidance, I'm not going to scream at you.
Yeah.
I think that I've taught you well. I think that if you have any questions in that, I am your source for you to connect with me and ask me questions, whether it's again about sex, about alcohol, about any of these things and these topics that are extremely um, uh, prevalent in
Mhm.
teenage years. Talk to me about it.
Mhm.
I think that's something that my own mom did beautifully and perfectly. After the age of 15, she was a single mom with me and my sister. And again, it's very known for Hispanic Latinx communities for pregnancy to start at an early age,
Yeah.
for substance use, for erratic, risky behaviors. Where I remember immediately when we became a family, three, my mom, my sister, and I, she said, "I'm not going to be your best friend. I'm not going to let you do whatever you want, but I
Right.
want to have an open communication. If something happens, if you're feeling a certain way, like this is what usually happens. This is reality of it. And I wouldn't want this consequence to happen to you. So I would
Right.
rather you talk to me and bring down that taboo and that feeling of shame and guilt. And on the contrary, to say, yeah, mom, I'm curious about birth control. I'm curious about sex. I'm curious about social media and TikTok or Snapchat, and maybe what are the pros and cons in that. For parents, again, it's going to be a difficult topic for them, but even for them to say, good question, thank you for asking. I feel a little uncomfortable with it, but I want to have this conversation with you. So let's try having it. And that means we can have one, two, three, four, however many we need, so that we can both feel supported and validated in it.
Yes. We do have some comments. My friend Elisa says it is tricky. It is a tricky line between parenting and friendship. You can't be too friendly with them. You could be a friend too soon and then can't be too tough on parenting. So she also wonders, how do you balance that? And
Mhm.
just like you were saying, you teach them um, how things are done, expectations, and maybe consequences as well. And that's the thing with the Latinx community. It's taboo to talk about sex with your kids because you can't, oh my goodness, you can't picture your child doing such a thing. But if you don't talk to them about it because it's a natural thing, eventually they're going to learn about it. So it's an actual thing and there are consequences. I was just talking to my husband. I was just telling him, I was like, when it gets to that stage, I want it to be more like, look, this is what the guys want and you're worth more and you don't need to do that, at a young age. You know what I mean? Because if you grow up not knowing what the heck that is, and then all of a sudden it happens to you with a guy is, as a teenager, a guy starts doing something that all of a sudden feels good and you're like, well, this feels great, why would I stop? You know what I mean? So it's kind of just explaining what is going on. I did not think that this topic was going to get here, but here we are.
I mean,
But
it's such a beautiful topic with all of my young adult clients in our parent sessions and with the clients. I will say this is a normal, healthy topic,
right,
sexual development. Um, just as much as a man has their needs, I want my clients, no matter if they're male or female or whatever they identify in within the LGBTQ, that you are a sexual being,
Of course.
and that is something very beautiful. That's not only about sexual intercourse, it's about your connection with your body. It's
Mhm.
about your self acceptance, no matter what size, no matter your weight, it's your self acceptance. Normalizing that bodies change, normalizing menstruation and periods, normalizing
Breastfeeding.
a lot of these things that, okay, it might sound like just sex. No, it's so much more than that. So much more than that. And that's what's beautiful for parents to bring forth all of this. And yes, we're talking about it maybe right now in these teenage years, but it happens way beyond. Like I said, I'm about 5 months pregnant. I'm due in November, and a lot of these gender reveal parties are popping up.
Yeah.
Beautiful, they're so exciting to watch. I think because of my profession, I really wanted to make it a point that, um, oh, what are you going to have? A baby, a
Mhm.
healthy child. I don't care if it's a girl, if it's a boy. I want it to be gender neutral. I
Yeah.
want them to, especially tíos and tías, grandparents. ¿Para qué le das la muñeca al niño? Boys should be playing with toys.
Yeah.
Let them.
Boy toys.
Let them have it, especially for the first year physically in children. You will never know if that's a boy or a girl.
Of
Um,
course. And we as parents are the ones that put those gender norms. During the pandemic, I bought my son a little mini kitchen set, and the first thing my mom said was why did you buy him that? It's for girls. And I'm like, says the woman who wanted my dad to wash dishes. And she's like, oh my goodness, she could not believe
yeah,
what that correlated to. Okay, don't let them play with a girl toy, but that you're teaching them that they shouldn't do dishes. So then she was surprised when he got up to the kitchen sink and he wanted to actually do the real dishes, you know? Or my friend was saying that her son was holding the baby and somebody said something to them and they say, What am I teaching them to be a good father? Is that so bad? It's not. It's now in these formative years that we're teaching them to play with things, and those things eventually will turn into real life situations when they're an adult.
yeah, just gender neutrality, gender equality in it.
Mm,
And a lot of these things that we're putting forth is you're teaching them so much more. You're
yeah.
teaching them compassion. Um, for instance, playing with a little doll, right? Teaching them compassion, you're teaching them respect, you're teaching them love and patience in whatever they do. My nephew one day came up to me, in a lot of these situations, they always remind me of him, because um, before I got pregnant, that's the one little little kiddo, little human that I would interact with, and him seeing me put on my makeup, doing my nails, he said, "Oh, can I do my nails? See, puppy, yeah, you can do your nails.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I like the colors. I want blue and green so I can look like the Hulk, so I can look like whatever it is." And
Yeah.
again, you're teaching them confidence. You're teaching them that this is something very normal and very healthy. Doesn't mean because they're doing these behaviors, they're going to turn out to be XYZ. No. And if they do, okay, it's no.
That's exactly what happened. I painted my son's nails because he saw me. I would get my nails painted, and he's like, "I want to." I'm like, "But why not? It's not causing harm." And I went to Catholic school most of my life, so we weren't allowed to paint nails because it was not the time and not the place. And I'm like, "What does that even mean?" You know? So I did paint my son's nails, and he had so much fun. He loved it. My dad saw it, and he's like, "What is that? Where is he?" And I'm like, "It's okay. I know in your mind you're like, he might turn gay." I'm like, nail polish will not turn a person gay. I'm sure he's already gay if he is. And will you stop loving him? And he's just like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe you. So my dad was, you know, uh, he learned that it's okay, you know. So one parent at a time, we're trying to change their mentality.
Yeah, and like you said, he's learning, or he's trying to learn, and that's the biggest thing
Yeah.
for us to try and practice to be aware of these unhealthy traditional mindsets and behaviors, for us to want to learn and want to change things little by little. As a parent too, you have to be confident in yourself. um, Even right now, being second generation and having a more acculturation of different discipline and parenting and a lot of different things. Does that mean that because we have a different view than our parents and our grandparents, our children are going to come out to be perfect little individuals? No, we still have a long way to go. This generational cycle will not end with our generation. On the contrary,
Yeah.
we're just beginning. So
Right.
as a parent, for you to say, I'm going to try to do things that I find best and fit and a little bit more open and more inclusive, that may bring forth positive results, and it may not. I don't know. I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
For you as a parent to say to those family members, to your parents, I don't know. I don't know the consequence of this, but I want to try with my child. If they want to cry and throw a tantrum, they're telling me something. Something's wrong.
Yeah.
Something's hurting them. It doesn't mean que le voy a dar una nalgada and they're not going to be able. There's other ways to do it. Let me try to practice the way that I feel confident enough, because I'm their parent.
Right.
Because we're a very collectivistic culture. Tu mamá te dice what to do, and then if you don't do it, oh, then what a bad daughter you are. Oh, vas a ver cómo te va a salir el niño a couple years from now. Oh, you're gonna
Mm.
see, you're gonna remember me. Yes, thank you for your concern and your comments and your love, and I'm still gonna try to parent the way that I find that it's gonna be best for my child.
We'll just wait until your mom and your tias are trying to give you sound advice, and you're like, oh yo yo. You try. I don't know. It's a very fine line to have to walk, but I think just learning ex- how to nicely and politely accept their words of advice and then carry on with continuing doing what you're doing, right?
Well, in session, we talk a lot about assertiveness. You can be assertive without being rude and disrespectful.
Right, which is
And
another fine line.
another thing, yeah, especially with Latinx women, female identified, te tienes que quedar callada, you shouldn't say anything. Or if you say it, ay, qué mal educada eres.
Mhm.
No, I can be assertive, I can be respectful while holding down my boundaries.
Right.
It's healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
So it's an ongoing thing that we're practicing.
Yeah, it's funny to see my daughter. I've kind of instilled that in my daughter. And sometimes she like defends herself and stands up for herself. And people are like, she's rude. I'm like, no, she's not. She has her boundaries and she's setting them with you. And to be honest, sometimes there's times where people will say something and it comes off as rude and you're kind of like you don't want to say anything, but my daughter will say something because and they were rude first, but then when my daughter kind of speaks up for herself and kind of, defends herself, they're like, "Oh, she's rude." I'm like, "No, not at all. You were rude first, but okay." But it's so hard to I like how parenting is moving into the direction of progressiveness.
Yeah,
Um, we just have to keep on working on it. So
100%.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking about our culture, talking about play. We wish you nothing but the best with your pregnancy. You still have another 5 more months to go because it never pops out at it's 40 weeks, which is closer to 10 months. So
Correct.
you're 5 months out. Good luck with everything, boy or girl. Are
Whatever
you
comes.
are you gonna have a ¿cómo se dice? A gender neutral name?
We have a gender neutral name. My partner and I, he is also Hispanic. We thought of a name for both a boy and a girl, and in English and Spanish.
Oh, yep. That's how I wanted
Right,
it.
it's been a little bit harder, and even sharing that, people are like, pues espérate si vas a tener niño o niña, and then you can decide what the name is. Well, that comes to the whole point. No, I want it to be gender neutral for both
Yeah.
genders. We'll find the gender at birth. It'll be a beautiful, nice
Yeah.
so for the moment, thank you so much for inviting me. Hopefully we can reconnect soon.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
Actually, you guys invited me.
yeah, awesome. Hopefully my supervisor, owner of the practice, Priscilla Dean, can join us
Yeah.
for other topics or additional questions that come up.
Yeah.
It would be awesome.
Yeah, and if anyone's watching now or the replay, if you guys have any other ideas that you can suggest to us, we're more than happy to work on something. So, all right, ladies, thank you. I'm gonna go start making dinner before the kids want some food.
No
All right, have a great night.